What is the worldly religion of the Jew? Huckstering? What is his worldly god? Money? Money is the jealous god of Israel, in the face which no other god may exist. Money degrades all the gods of man and turns them into commodities. The bill of exchange is the real god of the Jew. His god is only an illusionary bill of exchange. The chimerical nationality of the Jew is the nationality of the merchant, of the man of money in general. That, folks, that was Karl Marx from his essay on the Jewish question. And all of his ineptitude and all of his evilness and all of his so-called political philosophy. Welcome. This is AllMinucOne. My name is Bill. Please, folks, if you like my content, hit that like button, share, and subscribe. So today I want to talk about some of these progressive ideologies. What's new? It's what I talk about. It's kind of my thing. It's because it's cancer. It's evil. Now, I had some interesting exchange on the interwebs today, briefly, this morning, and I thought that I would share some comments I made, some thoughts, because this really does come down to what is going on in our culture today. So for quite a while, I've been talking about the demonization, and I mean in personal conversations or over the internet or whatever, but the demonization of men, of white men, of Christian men, as being comparable to the Jews in Nazi Germany. Now, why did I bring up Karl Marx there? Because Karl Marx was just as despicable and evil as Hitler. His ideology is based in pure evil. He himself was Jewish, but his father left Judaism, became an atheist, and Marx decided that he thought that the problem with the world was religion, the opiate of the masses. It's a very popular saying today because people praise Marx as if he wasn't a fool. And I'm telling you now, Karl Marx was an idiot. He was not that bright. He had a lot of problems, and he was quite dejected with the world. The reason why people pick up his ideology is because it is an ideology of evil and revenge, and that is truly what is in their hearts. And you might say, Bill, well, isn't that an oversimplification? Well, maybe it is, but at the core of everyone is the darkness. It is your shadow. You have things inside you that will come out if you do not deal with them. See, one of the protections of Christianity is that I understand I am not a good person. Christ himself, when a young man called up to him and said, good Lord, good sir, he said, do not call me good. There is no one good but the Father in heaven. Now, I strive to be a good person, but I know who I am, and I know what I am capable of. And those of you who embrace the dark ideologies, you haven't found out yet. You haven't found out you're evil. But let us move on. Let us get to the matter at hand here. So the topic of discussion was this. Someone posted, modern anti-racism is theoretically parallel to Nazi anti-Semitism. It says both are based on conspiracy about one race dominating and subjugating all others. Both are sold as moral stands against tyranny. They only create tyranny, of course. Both involve the legislative and cultural segregation of the oppressor group from the rest of society. Both involve marginalizing members of the oppressor group by throwing a label at them, white privilege and conniving Jew, respectively, on the basis of which any and all of their concerns may be disregarded / marginalized. And he says, edit, please note that I said parallel, not identical, because people responding. No, they actually almost are identical. So my response was this. I've been saying this for years. It's the same with few exceptions. The majority institutional powers in the West support racism against whites and special treatment for those whom are non-white. The system that has systemic racism is owned by the left. They are the corporate media, Hollywood, academia, major cities, all of our urban centers, that is, are almost all completely controlled by leftists. The largest political party in the world with the majority membership, the Democratic Party, and most of the government bureaucracy. By the way, folks, if you hadn't seen today, the president went out and sent another executive order, or clarifying his executive order about teaching this anti-racism, white fragility training within the schools. And good on him, because it is toxic, progressive cancer meant to do nothing but divide and scapegoat. So anyways, it says, it's led by whites who claim to be overtly racist, i.e. Robin DiAngelo. It's a supremacist movement claiming ethnic minorities or non-whites are lesser than whites and cannot help themselves, so whites must save them. It ostracizes those who aren't white that do not believe in the narrative as white supremacists. That is anyone who believes in thinking for themselves. That is, say, black conservatives. A lot of black conservatives have been coming up lately. There is Larry Elder's film, Uncle Tom. He had a free clip of that. I actually consider playing that on my channel here soon. He had a clip of excerpts from that, and people talk about that. Obviously, people use the term Uncle Tom as a slur, as someone who is in line with the white slave master. Of course, they're fools, because Uncle Tom was the hero of the book, allowing slaves to escape. They call you this because you've been brainwashed. You don't know what you're talking about. It's all just a bunch of empty platitudes. And so you use stupid words to tell a black man that, oh, because you like the Republicans, by the way, which fought the Civil War over slavery, the Republicans, by the way, who did not bar slaves from voting, the Republicans, by the way, that voted in the amendments in the Constitution that made free slaves full citizens, because many of the Democratic-controlled states were not allowing that. And the same Republicans who later on voted in the Civil Rights Act. Now, LBJ gets credit for that because he was a Democrat, but the reality is the Democrats were against it. The only Republicans who were not were those who were holding a staunch constitutional point of view, saying that it was not in the purview of the federal government per the Constitution. And they were correct. It is not. Currently, in California, the state legislation for the Civil Rights Act is essentially being voted on to be removed. They want racialized laws. Those racialized laws will be targeted toward white people. And it's going to give a particular advantage, supposedly, that's the point of it, to minorities. That's silly. We should not judge people like that. We should judge people on their merits. That is the only moral way to do it. So, anyways, I said here, that is, anyone who believes in thinking for themselves, is independent and hardworking, is acting white, thus an oppressor. Recall the infograph that the Smithsonian put out a while back that they took down very quickly. This is, again, based on the idea whites are superior. Now, you have to understand this. Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, is afraid of ethnic minorities. She states this in her book, and she believes that she is superior to other races. There is an interesting element of the white saviors, the white elitists, that believe that they are superior. They are truly white supremacists. They believe that they have to oppress other whites in order to bring up those of minority groups, because the minority groups aren't on equal footing. And they don't mean systemically or anything like that. What they really mean is they mean culturally, intellectually, and morally. What they're saying is that certain minority groups are children, and they must be treated like children. That is why they do not wish to do things, these governments do not wish to do things like arrest people who are in the middle of rioting and looting and arson. So then it says, it is all predicated on collectivism and progressive ideology, just as Nazism was. The economics are an inversion of Nazism, and that the minority ethnic group will get more socialism instead of the majority. This, of course, was done in South Africa after apartheid and has caused a two-tier economic system. So I had typed this out on my phone, guys. Two-tier economy with the rich whites living in capitalism, while the poor blacks under socialism live in ghettos. This is true. You can look at this. You can see it. It's very clear. Now they're trying to switch it back around because the blacks are trying to claim that the whites are, well, they took all their land. This isn't true. The Africans, the indigenous native peoples that lived there originally when the Dutch moved in, were not in the same areas. The farmers never took their lands. Those lands were just there. But again, people, you don't read anything, so you just believe stupid propaganda. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. That's why it's important to read, to understand history, to understand, have a basic understanding of economics, have an understanding of what actually happened and not what someone told you happened. And the reason why that's important is so that you do not become their mental slave. All right. So it says, it says now here, identitarian socialism is not unique to the Nazis. And it's not. It never was. It wasn't in Russia either. It's not in China. I talked about that with Mao and the Han Chinese. Here it says, all progressive ideologies are a destructive cancer and do nothing but impoverish, divide, and destroy societies. Show me a case where it has not. See, classical liberalism is not necessarily a progressive ideology. It is simply an ideology of freedom. Progressivism is not an ideology of freedom. It's an ideology of libertinism. A libertine is a person that believes that they should be able to do whatever they want, that they should have no morals and no bounds. And the progressive idea is that everyone's a child and everyone should just be taken care of, and that is going to provide you with the happiness in your life. And is not, because happiness is not and has never been based on material things. Once Alexander Solzhenitsyn lost everything and was shipped to the Gulag, he was amazed by those that kept their happiness because they were not mental slaves. They were always cheery. That is what I talk about being your attitude or your spirit. If you have the true nature and true spirit of Christ, if you take that on and you maintain your relationship with God, you will have that spirit. I can promise you. And there's nothing in the world that will strip that away. Nothing except for your own desires and greeds. But again, that's about knowing who you are, confronting yourself. It says, and then I continue to say, they all lead, talking about progressive ideologies, they all lead to hell on earth. Again, look at the issues of modern South Africa. You never have to search far in history or today to find examples of this evil at play. Now, there was more to this because I had someone comment briefly on what I was saying. And you have to understand that the commies never really stopped. The few fascist regimes that existed, that continue to exist, after the fall of Nazi Germany, didn't really expand. They just stayed within their nation. But communism itself is predicated on an idea that it must expand and that it will expand for the good of all humanity. And it doesn't matter how many people they destroy. Now, Hitler had a very similar vision. I've read to you that. In fact, I will show you a video, if you're not aware of, that I made a few weeks back about that. It is very much in the same mindset of Stalinism, of Maoism. Made a video on Mao as well. Mao's little book. And I also talked about Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals and understanding that these people that are in the street who are trained by people that are Alinskyites, they don't know all the arguments. Again, they're brainwashed, folks. It's literal brainwashing. They prey on foolish people. They prey on people that sit around and complain instead of ever trying to improve their lives. And trust me, I know what it's like to be in that spiritual place. You know, when you have horrible things happen to you over and over again, and some of them especially being your choice, you start to really doubt who you are and your decisions. Fortunately, for me, I had a belief in God, though I did not fully, I would say, commit or develop a deeper relationship until later on. But I also had a daughter, and my daughter was something that made me carry on. And I knew that I had to do the best that I could for her. She literally is what kept me going. Otherwise, at some point or another, I might have stuck a gun in my mouth. I mean, just being honest, it may have happened. I'm not a suicidal person at all. But I had some pretty horrible times. You know, the reality is, though, is they were my fault. They were based on my poor decisions and my poor judgment of being involved with certain people. I lacked wisdom. So, this response here says, the economics are an inverse of Nazism. That's quoting what I had put. It said, well, actually, not really. The enemies in both cases were the capitalists. The left intends to help all poor people, including poor white people, with their socialist policies. White privilege is just a rhetorical weapon, the same way as Jewish privilege was under Hitler. I do not agree. That is not what is going on in the United States. There is a caste system that they are building. We know about the oppression hierarchy, folks. Black females are considered the most oppressed group. The only thing above that, I didn't get into it in this, are trans and homosexuals. They use these people because these people decide to be arrogant. And I'm not talking about all, people that are transsexual or homosexual or any of that kind of stuff. I've had friends on both sides of that. And I can say for sure that in some cases they were confused, but for the most part, they didn't believe in all this intersexual craziness. This intersectional nonsense is just a postmodernist tool to make everything confusing and illogical and to demoralize and break your spirit. So I replied, agreed in part, but you're missing the mark. If you analyze someone like Richard Spencer, he wants socialism for only whites, as the Germans wanted it only for Germans. The Germans also wanted to rule the world with their socialism as the superior race, as descendants from Atlantis. I'm going to talk about that briefly, but they did believe that they were part of the Aryan race, which were the lost race, the last race of Atlanteans. That gets into the occult. The occult happens to be a hobby of mine. Though I'm a Christian, I've studied the occult for years. The Nazis were not Christians. I don't care what you have to say about any of that. You're just wrong. They allowed Christianity because they knew it unified the people. And by the way, the Catholic Church, at least the Archbishop, supported the Nazis very early on. I have to throw that out there. But sorry, Catholics, the papacy is an evil institution. In any case, it says that is the principle behind Aryanism, talking about the descendants of Atlantis. By the way, this is all from H.P. Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, people that were essentially the early Satanists early on. H.P. Blavatsky taught about theosophy. I actually wanted to make a video about this at some point. I probably will. About how all these racial things got tied up with mystics and these New Agers, and they're all the progressives, folks. You look at all the progressive minds who reject Christianity, but I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. As Daniel Tosh once said, well, I'm not honest, but you're really smart. You know? Look, here's the reality. The progressive ideology is whatever form it takes, is about secular humanism and the greatness of humanity. So it has to claim how horrible Christianity is, even though Christianity has tamed mankind and the West, especially. And many of the moral philosophies and ideas have spread throughout the world. Fastest growing religion, if I'm not mistaken, in China. The most highly persecuted religion around the world, by the way. We don't think about that because it doesn't happen as much here. People in other countries are killed for their faith still to this very day. Now, I have a lot of problem with a lot of modern Christians because they don't understand the first century takes. They don't understand what the people of the first century wrote. What they understand was, Constantine essentially injected the state into the Catholic Church, and over time, the Catholic Church became a state entity. In the United States, we have a separation of church and state because of that, as well as all the Protestant wars. But that is an aside. So, after that, I say, those at the top within the state get to reap the benefits of controlling the supply lines, a la Gunter Riemann's vampire economy. I made a video about that as well. And then let's see here. It says, so returning to the modern cultural war, most of the white people pushing social justice are white elitists with middle or upper class backgrounds who have no issues reaping the benefits of a free market. This is like Voldemort, who will not be named, but the neckbeard pseudo-intellectual faux commie who essentially reaps the reward of his capitalism and yet preaches to others about the morality of communism. Communism's not moral, folks. It's about taking things from other people. Communism is slavery. It's very interesting that the Slavic people were some of the most highly prized slaves for centuries throughout the Middle Ages. And then when slavery was abolished, when slavery was abolished in Russia, they were then serfs. And not for very long, until essentially the Bolshevik Revolution, or the many revolutions leading to communism in that nation. And it is interesting that those people with their ancestry and this understanding of poor life, and often being captured and sold into slavery for a millennia, that they would embrace communism most wholeheartedly. The Soviet bloc is full of Slavs. The word Slav means word. It comes from their language, meaning that they have a common language or a common word. Those people were such highly prized for their robustness as slaves throughout history that we get our English word slave from the word Slav. Let that sink in. So anyways, I talk about the free market, these upper middle class, SJW types, they're fine reaping the rewards of the free market. Carlos Maza is another type that, reminds me of that. I'm glad he's out of the limelight because he's not a good person, folks. He's very, very wealthy, and he's teaching you about communism. He does not have your best interest in mind. Let's also recall that Marx was part of the bourgeois. He never worked a day in his life. His parents paid all of his bills, folks. They wanted to redistribute as a means of equalizing those who were once oppressed, not necessarily the poor. Now, again, this is in response to the guys saying that they want to help the poor. No, they do not. They don't care about the poor. As George Orwell discovered, they just despise the rich, or those that are more rich than them. The millionaires and the billionaires, right? Now just the billionaires now. Now that I'm a millionaire, you too can write a book. You can write a book. Okay, Bernie, because before that you were saying the top 1%, which is about anybody who makes $350,000 to $400,000 a year in the United States. You weren't saying the top 0.00001%. You weren't talking about Hollywood, that's for sure. White's poor is oh yes, okay. Sorry. Leaving whites poor is racial justice to them. It's interesting when you can't read your own writing and it's type. It's text. Those in charge can have wealth because they are the benevolent elitist who freed society of its ills. Thus, they deserve it as a good person. Understand this. They know better than you as the elitists, and they are such great people for doing such good things for this little man, for the man that can never become them. The rest of the people, by the way, are just useful idiots. The people that follow along that may be poor, or most of them are young folks that grow up. You know, hippies from the 60s and 70s, they grew up. A lot of them are your parents. A lot of them never grew up too, so there is that. So I believe, let me make sure I have this right. Yep. It says, I guarantee you that the idea of reparations will not be extended to whites or Asians, but to any perceived slighted minority, and at a much higher rate for blacks. Now, I will say this. Indians might be included because they're closer to Middle Easterns as far as their ethnic breakdown, their features, all that stuff. What we would call the Far East, right, back in the day, or what they used to say was Oriental. They still use that word, by the way, in England. It's not racist. Whoever made that up. It's always meant the same. The Occident is the West. The Orient is the East. Asia, as it used to be known, was the Middle East. In any case, another word was always the Far East. But we're not talking about people with hooded eyes. We're talking about the people of India. By the way, some of those people with hooded eyes live in Russia or former Soviet states. Well, let's keep going. If you don't see that, you should be digging deeper into the issue. So I said that there's going to be a higher rate of reparations for certain ethnic minorities, or certain minorities in general. Right? It's going to be a caste system. It says, as always, progressives think as Lord Maynard Keynes did. That is, if you throw enough money at the problem, it will go away. Of course, that's not how economics nor life works. And it's not. It's why lottery winners go broke the next year. They don't invest their money. They already have problems. They don't know how to fix it. Dave Chappelle made a very insightful skit about that, right? Back in the day, if anyone else is aware of the Chappelle Show, I know it kind of disappeared forever. But it was a really funny show in the early 2000s when not everyone was woke and we laughed about stuff. It's really, really funny. It says, again, it's not capitalism nor free markets that is the issue when it favors them. It is a matter of power. All progressive ideologies are about power and control. They gain that power via collectivism and tribal alliances. These are primitive ideas and emotionally appealing to undeveloped, emotionally unstable, and unindividualized human beings. Now, this is highly important. I've said before that Marx was a retrograde. Marx was a reactionary, folks. He was going backwards in time to tribalism, to basic tribal, Rousseauian, noble savage nonsense. The savages weren't necessarily noble. Most of them did everything else that humankind has ever done. Chimpanzees hunt down and murder each other. What do you think human beings are capable of? Pretty sure those apes don't have religion. Pretty sure it goes deeper than that. It has to do with ancient hierarchical things within our system. This is evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology. Even if you don't believe in those things, we could just say it's nature. It's the way God put the world into place. And all progressives reject this idea. They reject the idea of different ethnicities. Now, I don't necessarily buy the idea of race, but if we look back at things over time, right? What we see collectives of families who proliferate their genes and populations rise. And so there's certain features that are very prominent. I could tell you very, very accurately if someone is Russian. There's a certain look. German, there's a certain look. My wife's former boss was German, had never met him before, and picked him out in 2 seconds at a large Liberty convention where thousands of people were at. And I said, that's your boss right there. She goes, how did you know that? And he said, because he looks ultra German. That's not racism, folks. That's recognizing basic facial patterns and facial features. And the color of your skin has largely to do with your latitude and your ancestry of that latitude, right? So Aboriginals in the Australian outback are very dark skinned because much of the outback is desert. Blacks, depending on where they came from in Africa, have different shades of skin because much of Africa is the desert. You get more into jungle areas, they're not necessarily as tall. It all depends. These are different family genetics that are proliferated. Middle Easterners are darker skinned. They tend to have more hair on their bodies. That hair has cooling properties when the sweat wicks away from the body onto the hair and evaporates. This is basic scientific stuff. Europeans living in the climates they did, especially the further north they got, have lighter skin because vitamin D is not available to them from the sun all year round. African Americans, black folks that living in America today, have issues with vitamin D deficiency. It is one reason, particularly, they might be more susceptible to the coof, by the way. But they have more vitamin D deficiency because they have to be in the sun longer to develop vitamin D. This is science based on our diverging evolution, if you would, family genetics. And you might say, Bill, I think I heard you say you don't believe in evolution before. No, I don't buy the mainstream narrative because I have a brain and I read and I research. It's not as easy as the supposed scientists would like to say it is. It's also it's also not an argument against God in any way, shape, or form, or that man was created in the image of God. God just used biological material. It says all of the animals came first. Darwin didn't make anything up new there. In any case, let's get back here to the rest of this. It says, of course, this is completely illogical because, let's see here. Did I get into... Nope, I have this a little bit out of order. So, let me find this. Here we go. It says, currently, you have black ideologues espousing similar propagandistic pseudoscience such as the Nazis used to, that blacks are a superior race because the melanin in their skin gives them magical powers. This has been going around. This has happened. There's a lady kicked off of a plane the other day espousing this kind of stuff. I've heard, not to like throw anyone under the bus, but I think it was Hotep Jesus talking about this. This is just nonsense. There's no scientific foundations behind this, right? This is just propaganda. A lot of this is espoused by like the black Hebrew Israelites and stuff like that. Melanin is melanin. It does nothing to make you mentally superior, physically superior, morally superior. But here's the crux of that. It says the white man supposedly has oppressed them, that is black people, of their superiority, or because of their superiority. So white men who are inferior somehow are able to suppress the black men who are superior, and women. Of course, this is completely illogical, because if there was a superior race of any kind, they would be at the apex of all. This is absolutely true. The reason why we call a lion the king of the jungle is because he is the apex predator. Now, there are other wild cats in Africa. We don't call them that. Lions are the apex. It says, we simply do not see that historically, nor now. That is an apex race. There is none. Now, there were certain geographic advantages, and there were certain things that rose at different levels at different times as far as technologies and societies. But if you look culturally across the world, societies pretty much have a normal distribution of the way that they rise accordingly. Here in the Western Hemisphere, in the Americas, no one ever invented a functioning wheel. They had no beast of burden. The geography here was good, but unlike Europe, there were certain technologies that Europeans developed. Europeans were also, though, you have to understand, you really have to understand this. Europeans were ransacked and fighting amongst themselves for millennia. There were outsiders coming in, the Huns, the Mongols. There were the Muslim raiders. Now, no one talks about this today because you can't talk about that. That's so wrong. Well, those folks, those Islamists, were never victims until after the, oh man, I don't know why it's escaping me, but the empire, the Muslim empire fell. So you have to understand this. You have to understand that the West grew despite of all that. And a lot of that had to do with their perseverance. They were fighting amongst each other all the time. There were power plays all the time. There were power plays within the religious structure because some idiot decided to, well, actually, he wasn't an idiot, but they decided to essentially politicize religion, which it had been before. Don't get me wrong. Religion's always been politicized throughout almost all cultures. The mistake is that the Christians gave into that, and it never had been before that. So, the point is that though Europeans had better geography, so they had better farming, they had better ability to basically travel and develop their cities, other nations or other continents like Africa are much harder to develop. Asia is very well known. There's a saying, you don't conduct a land war in Asia. I'm talking about what we now call the Middle East. Why? Because it's desertous. It's hard to live out there. The Arabs, before they developed their religion of Islam, were wanderers. They were wandering nomads. They were desert people. On the other hand, the Orient, Eastern Asia, they were able to develop because of their geography again, but only in some areas to some degree. And then they implemented, of course, certain policies that, like communism and modern society, that have destroyed them once again. So let's go through the rest of this, and get out of here. It says, We simply don't see that historically nor now. That and ignore that African slave trade was developed by Africans, Muslims, and Jews, as well as Europeans. It's all true. They want to blame it all on white people. They also neglect that the Slavs, who were historically the most prized slaves, they also ignored the slavery of Asia and amongst the natives in both North and South America before European explorers. It happened, folks. It happened. Had nothing to do with Christianity. Christianity never embraced slavery. In fact, the true message of Christianity is to reject your slavery to sin and the ruler of this earth. And communism, socialism, fascism, progressivism, all comes from that ruler, folks, because he wants you to be enslaved. You don't have to believe in that, but it's true. Yeah, so it says, if these extremists win this civil war, we are in there will be effectively the equivalent of the Hindu caste system based on ethnicity. Only whites with power, as mentioned above, will have wealth. Blacks will be directly below them, and they will have a second set of legalities ruling them. This is what they want. This is what they talk about. They've been talking about it for a decade now. There's writings that go further back than that. This is what they want. Then you will have Muslims, Hispanics, Jews, and Asians in that order or something close to that. That will be the caste system, folks. It will be the new caste system. Let's see here. It says, any Christian of European descent who is not in the elite will be seen as the lowest. Males may even be castrated, as these people's hearts are full of darkness. Now, I want to make a point here real quick that the reason why there are no blacks in the Middle East is because the Muslims, any slaves that they took, they castrated. Every single one of them. Every single male slave, they castrated. This is the history, folks. This is just simply the history. It says, any minorities who disagree with the woke will also be considered the lowest level. Again, this isn't about fighting capitalism. It's only about power, control, and the vengeance of the darkness of their souls. So, let's see. That brings me to a few quick quotes here. This is from Isaiah, and it says, and he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many and people, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into porging hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Isaiah 2:24. This is a prophecy about the coming of Christ. Christ said that there would be a remnant of people. There would always be a remnant. Most of people who claim to be Christians are not. There's a great sermon. Oh man, I can't remember the guy's name. I'm being forgetful today. But by an 1800s minister, he talks about make sure that you are where you're supposed to be at in the Lord, essentially. Because there's so many warnings, and this is the same thing I learned from reading the early church. There's so many warnings. Even of the 12 disciples, the closest to Christ, one betrayed him. Peter denied him. And when he came back, Thomas doubted. But there are all kinds of warnings to Christians about really being a Christian. And the scariest words are from Matthew on the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus says that, people will come to him and they will say, Lord, didn't I prophesy in your name? Didn't I do great signs and miracles in your name? Didn't I do this, this, and that? And he say, get away from me, you worker of lawlessness. You worker of iniquity. I never knew you. And yet you have people out in the world now who teach that the message of Christ is you can go sin as much as you want. He's got you covered. It's not what he taught at all. And how dare you? Anyways, I'm not going to get on a religious rant here. Here, Jesus says, this is in the Beatitudes, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Here, from the Didache, one of the first original Christian pamphlets. This is first century writing, folks. And of these sayings, the teachings is this: bless those who curse you, and pray for your enemies, and fast for those who persecute you. By the way, this is taken right out of the Sermon on the Mount. For what reward is there for loving those who love you? Do not the Gentiles do the same? But love those who hate you, and you shall not have an enemy. Abstain from fleshly and worldly lusts. If someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him also the other, and you shall be perfect. From Justin Martyr, we who hated and destroyed one another, and on account of their different manners, would not live with men of a different tribe. Now, since the coming of Christ, live familiarly with them, and pray for our enemies, and endeavor to persuade those who hate us unjustly, to live comfortably to good precepts of Christ, to end that they may become partakers with us in the same joyful hope of a reward from God, the ruler of all. That is a second century Christian. By the way, it's the Ottoman Empire. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. You know, your mind blanks. You make these videos, you got all this stuff up in your head. Sometimes it just cuts out, and that's the way it is. So, you know, you guys will live. It says, we who formerly used to murder one another do not only now refrain from making war upon our enemies, but we also, that we may not lie nor deceive our examiners, willingly die confessing Christ. And there is secular testimony to this. Secular Roman testimony about who true Christians were. That they would go to their death no matter how long you tortured them. How far we have fallen. We who were filled with war and mutual slaughter and every wickedness have each through the whole earth changed our warlike weapons, our swords, into plowshares. Again from Isaiah. He's quoting Isaiah. And our spears into implements of tillage. And we cultivate piety, righteousness, philanthropy, faith, and hope, which we have from the Father himself through him who was crucified. Here, Irenaeus, writing slightly later, no new covenant was given, but they used the Mosaic law until the coming of the Lord. But from the Lord's advent, the new covenant which brings back peace, and the law which gives life has gone forth over the whole earth, as the prophet said, for out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and etc. It goes down here. The law of liberty. That is this talks about the plowshares and everything else, but the law of liberty. Paul calls it the law of liberty. Why? Because you were free. You were free from your darkness and evil when you were in Christ. Doesn't mean that you won't fail. Doesn't mean you won't try to return. You are human. But when you remain in Christ, you are free. And there is no such thing as a progressive Christian. I'm sorry, folks. You cannot be. You are not serving Christ and the Father correctly. Now, I want to bring something else to your attention that he says. It says the new covenant, which brings back peace. Interestingly, folks, non-Christians will try to use the Old Testament to browbeat you. And most of you have no answer because you do not study. Because you are weak in faith. But it says right here from Irenaeus, a very devout early church father, wrote in the 2nd century, literally one person removed from the apostles. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Irenaeus' teacher was Polycarp. Polycarp was taught by John the Apostle directly. So, real quick, before I close out here, last few things. If you don't believe that National Socialism was socialism, I have some news for you.
Nazis were socialists.
So that is from the Rageaholic or Razor Fist. This is a 16-minute video. Go watch it. How about this? Make sure I have some volume.
Nazis were socialists, simple as that. But the minute you say that, leftists and the advocates of socialism will claim that they are not. I can tell you right now that anywhere this video is posted will have someone posting a link that they...
So, yes, Nazis are socialists. That is Young Rippa 59. By the way, he's got great content, great libertarian content if you like that kind of stuff. Here, I don't even want to play this because this is almost 5 hours, is a video called Hitler's Socialism, Destroying the Denialist Counter Arguments. Folks, I've done my own videos on this. This was on the vampire economy. This is back when I was starting off. So this is on my channel. Let's see. How did I open this? All right, welcome. This is AllMinucOne. And my... Well, much more timid than probably I am now, but I'm getting better, I hope. And then here I did a whole video, Men Have Forgotten God, de Tocqueville, and why socialism, Nazism, and communism are mirror images. Also, if you guys want to know some things about how Nazi type occultism, H.P. Blavatsky, all that kind of Aryanism stuff is, why they chose the swastika, by the way, which is an Aryan symbol. It's a sun symbol. It's a very ancient symbol. The Nazis appropriated it, but it has nothing to do with Nazism. It goes back further than that. But again, you have to study the occult, guys. This is Robert Sepeher, or however you pronounce his last name, Sepeher, or whatever. This stuff's interesting to me. He's kind of like an occult historian, anthropologist type guy. Talks about Atlantis, fallen angels, and the archaic DNA. Supposedly, I've read some stuff about his books. He just talks about Aryanism and a master race. I'm not saying he's a neo-Nazi or anything like that, but he props up these same ideas. Now, H.P. Blavatsky, she was before Nazi Germany. She was not a Nazi, but taught the same ideas. It was just a form of mysticism. Also realize that Nietzsche taught about the Überman. Nietzsche was a German philosopher. Hitler appropriated that as well. So, with all that, guys, this has been AllMinucOne. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to see a live show, check us out tonight. ends_justify_memes on DLive. Okay? We'll be live at 7 p.m. We're also going to be live with a guest this Saturday. We don't usually do a Saturday show, but at 3 p.m. Saturday. But got to do it that early, guys, because big UFC event this weekend, and I'm not missing that. So, also, over on YouTube, The Ends Justify the Memes. Here's all of our replays. And if you want to support me in any way or my family, I do have a Subscribe Star set up. Please feel free or don't feel free. There's no obligation, guys. I'm going to do this stuff because, man, someone needs to do it. And I know there are a lot of people out there, but we all have different perspectives. We all bring different things to the table. And, I'm kind of sitting back. I'm kind of tired of sitting back and being passive about it. I need to get my voice out there. So, this has been AllMinucOne, and I wish you all well.